the cypherpunk history, culture, and kind of where all of this cryptocurrency, blockchain technology came out of. And I was reading in your research, have you digged into the whole cypherpunk movement and the history behind all of this stuff?
Absolutely, absolutely. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are very deeply entrenched from the cypherpunk movement. In fact, Bitcoin is a product of the cypherpunk movement. So I have a deep respect for the work that they've done, the hard work that they've done, and providing humanity with the keys and tools for freedom and privacy, because technology, as we've mentioned earlier, is a double-edged sword, and it can be used for either positive or negative things. It's inherently neutral, and the internet is an amazing tool, and we're seeing many great solutions and innovations coming out of the internet, and we're seeing many horror stories of mass surveillance and hacks and abuses also coming from the internet, or the internet being used for such. And so there's always been this digital or technological battle between um, centralized governments or authorities and hackers like the cypherpunks. One wants more surveillance, more control, and to restrict our freedom and mobility, or to at least go through their appropriate, blessed channels, I guess. And the other has been trying to use this technology as tools for liberation and for individual choice. And privacy is also a very important factor to individual choice, because there's such a thing called self-censorship, right? If you feel that you're always being surveyed and your identity is out there in the open, then you might hold back how you truly feel about a situation and communicating how you feel about it, because of the fear of repercussion of what might become of it, right? So there's this whole self-censorship that comes with surveillance, especially in certain countries where you could literally be jailed or executed for this sort of thing, or in other countries where you just draw unnecessary attention to yourself, which can produce headaches down the line. So the cypherpunks, they've been using cryptography. They invented things like PGP encryption, which which is key for a lot of encryption today, especially for sending people encrypted email messaging and stuff like that. So they invented that, and they also started working on the first prototypes of Bitcoin. You had BitGold. You also had Hashcash. You had all these various different prototypes, and then finally Satoshi Nakamoto just built on those prototypes, and he created a working, functioning model, the first functioning model of peer-to-peer electronic cash. And he first sent his white paper out to the Cypherpunk mailing list, so that this was the first community that started in on Bitcoin, and then it grew from there, right? And you still have many cypherpunks who are developers of the Bitcoin protocol, right? And the Bitcoin protocol can change, and it can adapt, similar to how technology adapts. And there are a few key factors that are important to make Bitcoin what it is, such as having it capped at 21 million, having it as a proof of work algorithm, making sure that it's used for or values individual privacy, and that it's censorship resistant and peer-to-peer, right? So you can make other modifications, and there have been many modifications since the early protocol, but as long as you keep those core principles, then you'll always have Bitcoin. As soon as you start deviating from that, as soon as you start requiring, people to tag their identification with KYC and all this crap on the Bitcoin protocol, as soon as you tell people, well, you can send money and you can't, and you're restricted and you can't, so on, so then it's not Bitcoin anymore, right? And
Yeah.
the beautiful thing is, because it's open source, the likelihood of that ever happening is probably close to zero, right? Because anyone could take the code and make their own version and whatever, right? It's the thousand-headed hydra. Believe me, if the system and the governments around the world could have controlled it to that capacity, they would have a long time ago. The only reason why it's around and they tolerate it is because it is so resilient, because of its open nature.